Mr. Tinkertrain.
All right, let's dive into the Zakk Wylde preset. I have a few things going on here, and I'm going to explain why I have it set up the way I do, and also show you different ways that you can actually use this preset. So usually I have a signal chain that doesn't really change, and in this particular case, I've got some extra pedals in here that could be used instead of the ones that I've actually chosen to use myself. And there's a reason behind that. One is that I recorded everything in mono. I panned the guitars left and right for the rhythm tracks, dual tracked, and then I had the solo tracks as a single mono track down the center, as I quite often do. But I also decided to set up this preset with some options for using it as a stereo preset instead. So we have a bass preset and a solo scene. Let's start with the bass preset. We'll start with the custom wah, which wasn't used in the demo that I recorded for this preset, but I've added because Zakk Wylde uses a lot of wah in his recordings. I've used a position is set obviously to my expression pedal, and I've also got it set up so that when it's in toe down position, it's set to off, and I don't have an expression pedal that has a switch, so I'll show you in expression assign. I've got the custom wah set here, and switchless bypass is set to toe down. I have the range set to mid, and the Q is set to 50%. I haven't moved that. Feel free to play around with the inductor and also the Q to suit your taste, but it sounds pretty good straight out of the box. Next up I have a metal gate. The threshold is set to minus 64.6 decibels, the attenuation minus 114.5 decibels. Following that I have an EQ7 that has a little bit of tone shaping just before it goes into the amp, and that's just to take away a bit of some of the flubby bottom end that I get, in particular with the pickups that are on this guitar. This is my Epiphone Les Paul Standard. Zakk obviously doesn't use these particular pickups. I believe he uses active EMGs. So they are going to sound different depending on what guitar you use, and as always with presets, you have to make some adjustments depending on your guitar. So with this one, I've just taken a bit of a bass cut here, boosted the 800 Hertz, and just backed off a little bit of the top end. That then goes into a chorus mono, and you can see I've got the rate and depth pretty low. The mix is very low at 11%, and I've got the low cut set to 32%, and the high cut is set to the default 10%. That then goes into the super drive, which I've got 59% for the drive, 45% for the level, and the tone roll back to 33%. And then that goes into the British Jubilee lead, which I've dimed the gain. I have the master up at about nearly 57%, rolled off a bit of treble, boosted a bit of middle, rolled the bass quite far back down to 2, which is 20%, and then the presence is at 6. That goes into a pair of, I've used the Mega V30 cabs. I've got 2 mics set up. So I've got a dynamic 57 with 90 Hertz low cut and a 5 kilohertz high cut. And then I've got an MD421, the same low and high cut, but that one is set 3 inches off the cap edge, whereas the SM57 is 1 inch off the cap. So it's quite a bright sounding mic setup, and I've got it blended at 50%. After the cabs, I have an EQ5, and I've used this kind of staggered effect here. So it drops the bass a little bit by 2.5% on 80 Hertz. I've also dropped the 750 at 2.4 decibels, and then I've dropped 6.6 kilohertz at minus 4.3 decibels. And that then skips over a bunch of effects here and goes into the large hall reverb. So you can see the settings I have there. And that sounds like this. I've just realized that the bass preset reverbs had changed somehow. The bass preset is supposed to be using the large room reverb, not the large hall reverb, and then the solo scene uses the large hall reverb. So going back, this is actually how the bass preset sounds with that reverb. Now I've included a couple of foot switches here. One is the gate and the other is the chorus. The gate could be quite kind of annoying sometimes, so if you wanted to switch that off, you are going to get a bit of buzz, especially the fact that I'm sitting next to the computer and it's going to get noisy. If I was to turn the chorus off as well. And I've also included the chorus so you can switch that off. But it's such a big part of Zakk's sound that it's probably best to be left on. So moving on to the solo scene, you can decide whether you want the metal gate on or off. It is going to choke some of the notes, but generally I found that it was okay, especially when I was doing the No More Tears solo. So between the bass preset and the solo scene, the only changes are that the large hall reverb is used and the echo tank is used. So with the echo tank on, so moving on to how you can change this up to be stereo setup instead of mono. Now, I prefer the sound of the chorus set before the super drive in this particular case. So I'll show you how it sounds before and then I'll move it to after the amp. So I've turned off the super drive. Here's the chorus. Now I'm going to move the chorus to after the cab. So I haven't changed the settings, I've just moved the position of the chorus. In this particular case, it sounds a little bit more flanger kind of effect. So I don't know, I just prefer it over here. But if you want a stereo chorus, I've included the stereo chorus after the cab, after the EQ in fact. Having it here means that it won't be collapsed into a mono signal. So I am recording in stereo. So here is the effect turned off and on. And now with the super drive, which by the way, I've just turned the drive back down to 40%. I think it was inheriting the solo drive setting for some reason. It should have been a bit lower. And here's the mono again. Sounds pretty awesome in stereo. I use a QSC CP8 as my single monitor speaker, so it doesn't really make any sense for me to use a stereo setup. But when I'm recording, I've got headphones on, it sounds absolutely enormous when you do use this stereo wide chorus effect. But you're not going to hear that with a single speaker, and if you don't use two FR speakers, then you probably don't need this either. So you could stick to the mono sound. Another thing you can do is use the micro shifter. So I've turned off the chorus effect altogether, and I'm going to show you how it sounds with the micro shifter instead. I've got the defaults set up here. Actually, I'm going to push this up to 50% mix, and I've got the pitch left and pitch right set to 6 cents and minus 6 cents. So without. And with. Now, if this is too much of an effect for you, you can change the mix. Or you could reduce the actual amount of pitch left and pitch right. It sounds really nice, and I'm going to save that set to 32% mix. But I'm also going to turn it off. So now here's an example of using the stereo chorus rather than the mono for the solo scene. And with the micro shifter. I forgot to change the settings. So this should be 6, 6, and 32%. And if you want to go really crazy, put the chorus on as well. And now the mono chorus and the micro shifter. And finally, I have to sit back for this one. You can use the wah as well. So there you have it. That's my Zakk Wylde preset. You can grab this preset from my website at johnsguitargarage.store. If you enjoy this preset, there are some others available on my website. Some are paid presets, some are preset packs, and others are pay whatever you like. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.